A cowboy rescued a stranded bride in the flood. She found his heart was the refuge she longed for. The rain had started before sunrise, soft at first, almost gentle, the kind people barely notice as they go about their day. By mid-morning, it had grown heavier, steady and persistent, tapping against rooftops and soaking into the ground that had already taken more water than it could hold. The sky stayed low and gray, as if it were pressing down on the land, and the air felt thick and uneasy. She had been awake since dawn, sitting on the edge of her bed in a quiet rented room, staring at her wedding dress hanging on the closet door. It was wrapped in plastic, untouched, clean and perfect. Everything about the wedding was supposed to be perfect. That was the word everyone kept using: perfect venue, perfect guest list, perfect future. Yet as she looked at the dress, she felt none of the excitement she had once expected to feel on a day like this. She told herself she was just nervous. People always said that doubt before a wedding was normal. She repeated that thought while she dressed, while she packed her small overnight bag, while she checked her phone again and again for messages that felt more like reminders than comfort. The wedding was scheduled for the next afternoon, but she had chosen to drive early to clear her head. The venue was a few hours away, near open countryside, and she believed the quiet road would give her space to breathe. The rain followed her as she drove. At first, the roads were wet but manageable. Fields stretched out on both sides, their colors darkened by water. Small streams ran faster than usual, swollen and muddy. She noticed them, but she didn't worry. She had driven these roads before. They had always been calm, predictable, like the life she thought she was building. As the miles passed, the rain grew louder against the windshield. The wipers worked hard, but visibility dropped. She slowed down, gripping the steering wheel more tightly. Her phone buzzed with another message from her fiancé, asking where she was and reminding her of the schedule. She didn't answer right away. She turned the radio down and focused on the road, trying to quiet the thoughts in her mind. She thought about how quickly everything had been decided. The engagement, the plans, the expectations from family and friends. Everyone had agreed it was a smart match. He was dependable, well-respected, and offered security. No one had asked if her heart felt settled. She hadn't asked herself either, not honestly, until now. The road narrowed as she turned onto a less traveled route, one suggested by her navigation app as a shortcut. Trees lined both sides, their branches heavy with rain. Water pooled along the edges of the pavement. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. Turning back felt like another kind of delay, and she had already delayed enough in life, or so she'd been told. A few minutes later, she saw it. The road ahead dipped slightly, and water stretched across it like a wide, moving sheet. It didn't look deep at first glance, just a shallow crossing. Cars had passed through earlier, leaving faint tracks. She slowed almost to a stop, her heart beating faster. She remembered hearing warnings about flooded roads, but the idea still felt distant, unreal. She told herself it would be fine. Just a few seconds through and she would be on the other side. She eased the car forward. Almost immediately, she felt the pull. The water was stronger than it looked, pushing against the tires, tugging the car sideways. Her breath caught. She pressed the gas gently, then harder, but the engine sputtered. A warning light flashed on the dashboard. Panic rose in her chest as the car lurched and then stopped completely. The engine died. She tried to restart it once, twice, but the sound that came was weak and uneven. The water continued to rise, creeping up the doors. It was cold, fast, and filled with debris, small branches, leaves, bits of mud swirling past like reminders of how little control she had. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. There was no signal. The reality of her situation settled in slowly, then all at once. She was alone, stuck in a car that was no longer safe, with rain pouring down and water climbing higher by the minute. The quiet road that had seemed peaceful now felt isolated and dangerous. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She remembered advice she had heard somewhere: stay in the car, don't fight the water, but fear made every thought blur. She unlocked the doors just in case and rolled the window down slightly. The sound of rushing water filled the car, louder than the rain, louder than her own breathing. For the first time that day, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, the kind of crying that comes from feeling overwhelmed and very small. She cried for the wedding she wasn't sure about, for the expectations she felt trapped under, for the choice she had made to take this road instead of turning back. Most of all, she cried because she was afraid. Minutes passed, though they felt much longer. The water reached the bottom of her seat. She lifted her feet, tucking them close. Her thoughts raced. She wondered if anyone would notice she was missing soon enough. She wondered if this flood was a warning she should have listened to long ago, in more ways than one. She looked out through the rain-streaked windshield and saw nothing but gray sky and moving water. The world beyond the car felt unreachable. She had always believed she could plan her way through life, prepare for every outcome. Now she understood how quickly plans could fail. A sudden sound broke through the rain, the faint splash of movement somewhere nearby. She lifted her head, straining to see. Her heart pounded as hope and fear mixed together. She didn't know if help was coming or if her mind was playing tricks on her. She leaned toward the window, peering through the rain. In that moment, as the flood closed in and her certainty washed away, she didn't know that this day would change everything. She didn't know that the road she chose, the storm she underestimated, and the fear she felt would lead her not just out of danger, but toward a truth she had been avoiding. All she knew was that she was stranded, the rain was still falling, and her carefully planned life was no longer holding her up. The sound she heard grew clearer with each passing second. At first it blended with the rush of water and rain, but then it stood out, steady, purposeful movement. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and leaned closer to the window, her heart beating fast. Through the rain, she saw a shape moving along the edge of the flooded road. It was a horse, and beside it a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered jacket and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the rain. His boots were already soaked as he stepped carefully through the shallow edge of the flood, testing each step before moving forward. A rope was looped over his shoulder, and his hand rested calmly on the horse's neck, guiding it with quiet confidence. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Relief washed over her so suddenly it made her dizzy. She waved her arm weakly through the open window and tried to call out, but her voice came out thin and shaky, nearly lost in the sound of the storm. The man noticed. He stopped, squinting through the rain, then raised a hand to signal that he saw her. He didn't rush. That calm, steady pace made her feel safer than any hurried movement could have. He led the horse closer, keeping to the side where the water was less forceful. "You all right in there?" he called out, his voice low but strong, cutting through the noise around them. She nodded quickly. "I think so." The car just stopped. "I didn't know the water was this deep." "I'm going to get you out," he said, "but we'll do it slow and safe, don't rush." Then he guided the horse a few steps closer, positioning it so it could offer support if needed. "When I open the door, the water will come in fast," he warned. "That's normal. Just hold on to me and step where I tell you." Something about the way he spoke made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore, like someone capable had taken charge of the chaos. He opened the door. Cold water rushed in, soaking her legs instantly. She gasped, instinctively pulling back, but he held the door steady and reached out his hand. "I've got you," he said, "one step at a time." His grip was firm and warm despite the rain. Slowly, she swung her legs out of the car and placed her foot where he pointed. The water pushed against her, but the rope and his steady presence kept her balanced. The moment she stood fully outside the car, fear surged again. The ground beneath her feet felt uncertain, the current strong. She clung to his arm, her breath coming fast. "You're doing fine," he said. "Just keep moving with me." She laughed softly, a mix of relief and disbelief, then covered her face as tears came again, this time not from fear but from the release of it. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know what to do." It was heavy and smelled faintly of earth and rain. She pulled it close, feeling warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fabric. "My place isn't far," he said, nodding toward higher ground. Roads are blocked right now. You can wait there until things settle. There was nowhere else to go, and something told her she would be safe. They walked together toward his ranch, the rain easing slightly as they went. The land opened up, wide and quiet, dotted with fences and dark shapes of cattle in the distance. The flood still moved through low areas, but here the ground held firm. As they walked, silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. She was aware of how different this place felt from her usual world. No traffic, no constant noise, no pressure to be anything other than present. Inside the small farmhouse, the air was warm and smelled of coffee and wood. He lit a lamp and handed her a towel. "You can dry off," he said. "There's spare clothes if you need them." As she sat on the edge of a chair, wrapping the towel around her hair, she realized how tired she was, not just from the storm but from everything that came before it. He poured her a cup of coffee and set it down gently. "Drink. It'll help." She told him her name, where she was headed, and why. She didn't say much about the wedding at first, but he didn't press. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was with care. He told her about the land, how floods came every few years, how you learned to read the signs if you paid attention. He spoke of responsibility, of staying put, of helping when help was needed. There was no pride in his voice, only acceptance. As the hours passed, she felt something shift inside her. The fear faded, replaced by a strange sense of calm. Being rescued had reminded her how vulnerable she was, but also how deeply she wanted something real, something steady. Outside, the storm slowly lost its strength. Inside, she sat wrapped in borrowed warmth, safe for the moment, unaware that this rescue was only the beginning of a much larger change in her life. Morning arrived quietly, almost carefully, as if it did not want to disturb what the storm had left behind. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the windows of the farmhouse. Pale light slipped through the curtains and rested on the wooden floor. The air felt clean and cool, carrying the smell of wet earth. She woke on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her shoulders. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came back to her in pieces. The flooded road, the fear, the strong hand pulling her to safety, the warmth of the house. She sat up slowly, listening. The house was quiet but not empty. She could hear movement in the kitchen, the soft sound of a kettle being set down, the scrape of a chair. She stood, smoothing her borrowed clothes, and walked toward the light. He was at the table, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked up when he saw her and gave a small nod, not startled, not overly familiar either. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, her voice still a little rough from sleep. She sat across from him, wrapping her hands around the warm mug he slid toward her. Outside the window, fields stretched out, dark and shining from the rain. The floodwaters had pulled back, leaving behind mud and scattered branches, but the land looked strong, unchanged at its core. "Roads are still blocked," he said gently. "County won't clear them until the water's fully gone. Might be another day." Another part felt the weight of what that delay meant. Messages would be waiting, questions, plans that had been paused but not erased. "That's okay," she said quietly. "I understand." It felt different from the meals she was used to, which were often eaten while checking phones or thinking about the next task. Here, there was only the table, the food, and the sound of birds outside. After breakfast, he stood and pulled on his jacket. "I need to check the fences," he said. "Flood might have knocked some down." "You're welcome to come, or you can stay here." When she slipped slightly, he reached out without thinking, steadying her until she found her balance again. The touch was brief, respectful, but it stayed with her longer than she expected. As they walked, they talked more than they had the night before. She told him about where she grew up, about moving often, about learning early how to adjust to other people's expectations. She spoke carefully at first, but as he listened, really listened, her words came more easily. He told her about staying on the land his whole life, about his parents teaching him patience and responsibility. He spoke of long days and quiet nights, of storms that took and seasons that gave back. There was pride in his voice, but also humility. He didn't pretend the life was easy. He simply said it was honest. They reached a section of fence that had been bent by the water. He worked to straighten it while she held the post steady. Mud stained her shoes, but she didn't mind. For once, she wasn't worried about how she looked or whether she was doing something right. She was just there. Later, back at the house, she checked her phone. Signal had returned. Messages filled the screen, missed calls, worried texts, reminders. Her chest tightened. The life she had stepped away from, even briefly, was waiting for her to step back in. "You don't have to answer them right now," he said quietly, noticing her expression. "I know," she replied, "but I will, eventually. Things don't go away just because we stop looking at them." No pressure to speak, no need to fill the space. She thought about how rare that felt. In the quiet, she realized something that unsettled her. She felt safe here, not just physically but in a deeper way. There were no expectations placed on her, no version of herself she had to perform. She could be quiet, she could be uncertain, she could simply exist. That night they shared dinner again, talking about small things, the weather, books, stories from childhood. Laughter came easily, surprising her. It had been a long time since she laughed without thinking about how it sounded. When she went to bed that night, she lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts returned to the wedding, to the future she had agreed to the man she was supposed to marry. He was kind, she told herself, reliable, but kindness without understanding, she now realized, felt empty. Here, with someone she had just met, she felt more seen than she had in months. That realization scared her. The next day passed much the same, slow, steady, grounded. They worked, rested, talked. The floodwaters continued to recede. Roads reopened one by one. The world beyond the ranch was finding its rhythm again. Late in the afternoon, her phone rang. She answered this time. "Yes," she said quietly, "I'm safe." He simply waited. "I'll have to leave tomorrow," she said finally. "I figured," he replied. There was no disappointment in his voice, only acceptance. They sat together as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft colors. She felt the weight of the choice ahead of her pressing in, heavier now because she knew there was another way to live. As night fell, she understood something clearly for the first time. The flood had not just stranded her on the road. It had paused her life long enough for her to feel what she had been missing. And once you feel that, it's hard to pretend you haven't. The next morning arrived with clear skies and quiet air. The storm felt far away now, almost like something that had happened in another lifetime. Sunlight filled the farmhouse, warm and steady, resting on the walls and floor. Outside, the land looked calm again, as if it had never been disturbed. She stood near the window, holding her phone in her hand, staring at the open road beyond the fence. It was finally passable. The path back to her old life was open again, but her feet didn't move. Behind her, he poured coffee into 2 cups, the same way he had the day before. The familiar sound felt comforting, and that comfort made leaving even harder. "You sure you're ready?" he asked, setting 1 cup beside her. "I don't know," she answered honestly. They sat at the table, neither rushing the moment. There was no dramatic goodbye, no rushed decision. Just 2 people facing a quiet truth. She told him more that morning than she had told anyone in a long time. She spoke about how the wedding had been planned around convenience and expectations, how everyone said she was lucky, how she had tried to convince herself that comfort was the same as happiness. "I kept telling myself love would grow later," she said. "But deep down, I think I knew it wouldn't." She didn't want to make a decision she couldn't take back, but she also knew that pretending nothing had changed would be a lie. They walked outside together. The morning air was fresh, carrying the scent of grass and soil. Birds moved freely across the open sky. Everything around them felt honest and simple, and she wished her heart felt the same way. At her car, now dry and quiet, she paused. He stood a few steps away, giving her space. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me and for everything else." She drove away slowly, watching the ranch disappear in her mirror. With every mile, the world she was returning to felt louder. Traffic returned. Signs, buildings, people. Her phone rang again and again. When she reached the town where the wedding was set to take place, everything looked exactly as it had before. The decorations were ready. The venue stood waiting. People moved with purpose, checking lists, making sure nothing was out of place. They welcomed her with relief and questions. She answered politely, but her mind stayed elsewhere, on open land, quiet mornings, and a man who had asked for nothing from her. That night, she sat alone in her room. The wedding dress hung once more in front of her. She reached out and touched the fabric. It felt light, almost fragile. She imagined walking down the aisle. The faces, the smiles, the promises. Her chest tightened. She picked up her phone and stared at the screen. Her finger hovered over the contact name for a long time. Her heart raced, not with excitement but with fear of disappointing everyone she loved. Then she remembered standing in rising water, certain she might lose everything. She remembered the calm voice that said, "I've got you." The next morning the venue was quiet. Plans were undone. Questions spread quickly. Some people understood, some didn't. She accepted that she couldn't control that. She packed her bag again, this time with intention. The drive back felt different. The road was familiar now, but her heart felt lighter. She didn't know what waited for her, only that she could no longer ignore what she had learned. When she reached the ranch, the sun was setting. He was outside, working near the fence. He looked up when he saw her car and froze for a moment, unsure if he was seeing things clearly. She stepped out and walked toward him, her steps steady. "I needed to come back," she said. He searched her face. "You don't owe me anything. It's about choosing." In that quiet space they stood together, not rushing, not promising more than they could give. The flood had passed. The roads were open. And yet the hardest crossing had just been made, not with water but with truth. What came next would take time. But for the first time she felt ready to face it. The days that followed were quiet, but they were not empty. They carried a new kind of meaning, one built slowly, like the careful work of repairing land after a storm. Nothing rushed forward. Nothing dramatic happened all at once. Life simply began again, this time with honesty. She stayed at the ranch, first telling herself it was only temporary. There were things to figure out, loose ends to tie up, people to face. But each morning she woke to the sound of wind moving through open fields, and each night she fell asleep knowing exactly where she was. That sense of certainty was something she had never truly known before. He never pressured her. That mattered more than she could say. He treated her like someone who belonged there only if she chose to. He showed her how things worked, how to mend a fence, how to spot changes in the weather, how to move with patience instead of force. When she struggled, he waited. When she succeeded, he smiled quietly and moved on. They worked side by side most days. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Silence no longer felt uncomfortable to her. It felt full. In the past, silence had always made her nervous, as if it meant something was wrong. Here, silence meant peace. At night, they shared simple meals. The food was plain but good. She learned that comfort didn't need to be fancy. It only needed to be real. They spoke about the future in careful pieces, never making promises they couldn't keep. He told her about the land and the responsibility that came with it. She told him about the life she had left behind and the lessons it had taught her. There were difficult moments too. Messages still came from people who didn't understand her choice. Some were kind, some were not. There were days when doubt crept in, whispering questions about whether she had done the right thing. On those days she walked the land alone, breathing in the open air, reminding herself how it felt to be honest for the first time. One evening, weeks later, another storm passed through. It wasn't as strong as the first, but the sound of rain against the roof made her pause. She stood at the window watching water gather in the low places. He noticed her stillness. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." She was learning who she was when no one was telling her who to be. One afternoon, as they repaired a gate together, she looked at him and felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. "This place," she said, "it feels like home." That night, sitting under a wide sky full of stars, she realized what refuge truly meant. It wasn't escape. It wasn't running away from responsibility. It was finding a place and a person where she didn't have to hide parts of herself to be accepted. She thought back to the flood, to the moment when water rose and plans fell apart. She understood now that losing control had been the beginning, not the end. It had stripped away the future she thought she needed and revealed the one she actually wanted. Months later, when the land bloomed again and the scars of the storm had faded, she stood beside him watching the horizon. There was no grand declaration, no perfect ending, just two people choosing each other day by day. The refuge she had been searching for all along was never something she had to chase. It was something she found when she finally listened to her heart and had the courage to stay.